Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 150 based on novel. So let's start. Time passed day after day. From Juzi's perspective, Hui Yuhao should be making his move soon. At least, he should make some kind of probing attack, an attempt to destroy some of their surveillance soul tools on this side. His concealing abilities could be maximized only when there were fewer surveillance soul tools. But what caught her a little off guard was that she was waiting around as 5 days flashed by. Hui Yuhao didn't appear in the end, and their plan was successfully carried out. They were starting to extract the metals from the mine. The roads were too far, and in addition to the terrible conditions in a cold and dreadful place like the extreme north, transport was very inconvenient. Therefore, Juzi had decided before they departed that they would extract, refine and process everything on the spot. They would only transport all the rare metals when refinement was complete. Xu Qianran was the only person who knew that she was here in person, while all the rare metals that they would extract from this operation would all belong to the Empire's royal family, so that they could strengthen their control over the imperial family. Everything was arranged after she had a discussion with Xu Qianran. Has he really left? That's not quite like his personality. He has always been the kind to become braver as pressure piles on, and he will never admit defeat. Even if I am his enemy, there's no reason for him to leave just like that, since he is so determined to oppose me. Juzi was as dejected as she was suspicious. Truthfully, she would rather clash with Hui Yuhao than receive news once more that she had lost him. In the end, she had absolute authority over the army here, and all she had to do was not hurt him, even if they faced each other on the battlefield. She didn't feel very comfortable that he would leave just like that. This was how complicated a woman's emotions were. Of course, Hui Yuhao wouldn't give up. After traveling continuously for a long time, and 3 days after departing the Sun Moon Empire's great army, he was inside the extreme North's core region. Hui Yuhao didn't run into too much trouble as he flew forward. Typical soul beasts couldn't threaten him at all with his strength, and even those that were relatively stronger would immediately scamper away when he imitated the Ice Empress aura. The Ice Jade Empress Scorpion was one of the Extreme North's 3 heavenly kings. Most high-level soul beasts from the Extreme North were very familiar with the Ice Empress aura, and that was the reason why Hui Yuhao's imitation was almost always successful. The temperature dropped even more as they entered the Extreme North's core region. There were hurricanes and biting winds high up in the sky. Hui Yuhao didn't know how to fly when he was last here, so he didn't feel how powerful these hurricanes were. This time, he immediately suffered a blow as soon as he flew into the Extreme North's core region. A powerful gust of wind swept over, and Hui Yuhao couldn't resist at all as he was thrown higher into the sky. This terrifying gust was incredible, and contained vigorous explosiveness. If Hui Yuhao's body hadn't been sufficiently tough, and if he hadn't possessed an ultimate ice martial soul, he would have been torn to pieces. Hui Yuhao was barely able to land on the ground. He was overcome with fear. With his knowledge of powerful individuals, the gust of wind was probably equivalent to an 8-ringed soul Dolor's attack at full strength. He had just entered the Extreme North's core region. Wouldn't it become even more terrifying if he went deeper in? No wonder he almost never saw any soul beasts flying in the sky here. It lived up to its name as a forbidden grounds for humans. The Extreme North's core region shared a name with the Great Star Do Forest slaughtering grounds. Even the Sun Moon Empire's Evil Demon Forest was far inferior. In the end, the Evil Demon Forest got its reputation because of how powerful the Evil Eye Tyrant King was. The Great Star Do Forest slaughtering grounds contained many savage beasts, and the threat in the Extreme North's core region wasn't from its soul beasts, it was from its environment. In such an environment, even titled Dolor couldn't survive for too long. The air was incredibly dry, while the chilly winds cut like blades. Not a single stalk of grass could be seen, and the incredibly low temperatures could continuously burn down a soul master's soul power. It was almost impossible for them to live here. Furthermore, ice-type soul masters were a minority anyway. Therefore, very few soul masters came to this place to hunt soul beasts. This was the reason why the overall strength of the Extreme North soul beasts had grown to such a formidable level over recent years. If not for the fact that this place wasn't that suitable for soul beasts to live, it probably wouldn't take long for the extreme north soul beasts to catch up with the strength of the Great Star Do Forest soul beasts. Hui Yuhao no longer dared to fly in the sky with the lesson he had learned. He walked on the ground, and even though there were gusts of cold wind that cut through the air on the ground, they were much gentler compared to the winds in the air. Hui Yuhao had the Sky Dream ice worm to protect him the last time he was here, and only then could he resist the severe cold. He was back here many years later now, and he felt a little strange. Back during the first time he was here, he was as weak as an ant compared to the other beings in the extreme north. Without the Sky Dream ice worm's help, just the environment here would have killed him countless times over. 10 years later today, he had the ability to face this environment's dreadful conditions by himself. Furthermore, 2 of the extreme north's 3 heavenly kings were accompanying him. 10 years ago, him doing this was something that he didn't even dare to think about. Hui Yuhao didn't ask the Ice Empress or the Snow Empress anything else as they continued forward. The Ice and the Snow Empress would tell him when they arrived. He moved forward very naturally as his eyes moved a little as he glanced towards his left. There was life rippling from that place, and those undulations were very intense. What's that? Hui Yuhao immediately used spiritual detection and projected it into the distance. He quickly saw several soul beasts. There were several extreme northern bears that were incredibly muscular. These bears were very large, at least 7 to 8 meters tall when they stood up, while their bodies were extremely thick and tough. These soul beasts had thick fur, and their strength was terrifying. Furthermore, their explosiveness was so vigorous that they could spring over short distances as quickly as agility-type soul beasts. They were high up in the food chain within the extreme north's icy plains. There were 4 bears here, and 3 of them were grown, while there was only one that was relatively smaller, only 3 meters tall. It looked like a baby bear. Full-grown extreme northern bears had to have at least 1,000 years of cultivation, but one couldn't underestimate their threat just because they were only 1,000-year soul beasts. The extreme northern bears in this place were like the dark golden terraclaw bears in the Great Star Do Forest. 1,000-year extreme northern bears could rival normal 10,000-year soul beasts, and even though their fighting strength still couldn't match up to that of the dark golden terraclaw bears, very few soul beasts dared to provoke them. At this moment, these 4 extreme northern bears were charging at Hui Yuhao at breakneck speed. Hui Yuhao instantly felt a little exasperated, because he remembered the extreme northern bear's characteristics. Powerful soul beasts like that in the extreme north had very sensitive senses of smell, because the extreme north always had a scarcity of food. Therefore, their sense of smell became very strong through their consistent evolution. They could smell other living beings from kilometers away, and it was clear that they had discovered him, and were treating him like prey. Hui Yuhao didn't run, because he remembered something else when he recalled some information about the extreme northern bears. When he was undergoing training in the Ultimate Soldier Plan, his teacher that was teaching him about food told him that the extreme northern bear's paws were the most delicious amongst the other bears. That was because they were living in the extreme north, and under continuous refining from the severe cold, their paws were especially fat and juicy. They could be cooked with certain special methods, and they would taste extremely delicious while being extremely nutritious for humans. They were very beneficial to soul masters. However, nobody really dared to try to kill them because they were naturally very ferocious and powerful. They lived in the extreme north's core region, and soul masters' appetites were not enough for them to give their lives in this place. Therefore, the extreme northern bear's paws were sold at extremely high prices in every empire on the continent. There are 4 extreme northern bears. Since you're treating me like food, then I will not give you a chance. Let's see who gets to eat who in the end. You can't hurt them. The Ice Empress and Snow Empress voices rang out in Hui Yuhao's spiritual sea at the same time. Hui Yuhao's mouth twitched as he attempted to resist them. Why? Only they can treat me like food, but I'm not allowed to eat them? What kind of reasoning is that? The Ice Empress grunted coldly and said, if I say no, that means no. There aren't many soul beasts in the extreme north in the first place, and these bears are considered one of the rarer species. If these bears can grow until they reach 10,000 years of cultivation, they will become the main fighting force of the extreme north soul beasts. Are you saying that you want to launch a beast wave? Who are you going to target? Hui Yuhao said exasperatedly. The Ice Empress snapped, What do you think? Don't you want to deal with the Sun Moon Empire's army? You think you can do that by yourself? What? You can command those ice bears? Hui Yuhao answered in shock. The Ice Empress laughed coldly. She said nothing, but the arrogance in her eyes was very evident. The 4 bears were charging very swiftly, and it didn't take long before they appeared in Hui Yuhao's vision. The extreme northern bears were very muscular, while their limbs were very well developed, but their brains weren't that simple. The 3 grown bears swiftly dispersed, and the burliest one was in the middle as it dashed toward Hui Yuhao. The other 2 wrapped around towards the flanks, while the smallest one followed behind. They were surrounding him. Hui Yuhao wasn't worried at all. The only thing he was thinking about was the bear's paws. What a pity that they were so delicious. The largest bear charged first. When it saw Hui Yuhao, who was standing there calmly, and the Ice and Snow Empress behind him, it was also momentarily stunned. It was the first time that it had come across humans that were so calm. Soul beasts that had relatively lower cultivation like these had never seen the Ice Empress or Snow Empress before, especially when they didn't have this form before. They were in human form now, and they were no different from humans when they were deliberately hiding their aura. Roar! The extreme northern bear roared as his majesty was disregarded. It charged at Hui Yuhao with his muscular body, and its enormous frame stood up as it swung its paws down at him. Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection had been trained on it the entire time. He could clearly feel that when the bear was using its strength, its thick fur was immediately charged with intense soul power, and every single hair became like needles. Its fur was its best defense. There was no question that this bear was a kind of soul beast where its own body was its main strength. The extreme northern bears shared similar characteristics as the dark golden terraclaw bears, except it didn't have the dark golden terraclaw bears' fearsome claws. Hui Yuhao glanced at the Ice Empress and the Snow Empress, and when he realized that they didn't intend to do anything, he couldn't just stand there and let the bear smack him. He went forward to face the bear with form like a demon, and he grabbed the bear's right paw that was swiping down at him with both arms as he suddenly used his strength. Even though Hui Yuhao's martial soul didn't have anything that was based on strength, he had obtained part of the golden dragon's strength after Wang Chua had sacrificed herself for him. In addition to the fact that he had 7 soul rings, he definitely wasn't afraid of the bear in front of him in terms of strength. Hui Yuhao swung the bear's enormous body that was 8 meters tall into the air and sent it crashing into the icy surface as an explosive sound rang out. The other 2 bears that were charging in from the flank were taken by surprise. However, they accelerated as they charged toward Hui Yuhao furiously. This is how a male and 2 females are like. Hui Yuhao's body flickered, and he didn't take them by force anymore. Instead, he ran behind the Ice and Snow Empress. If you 2 aren't going to let me eat bear paws, shouldn't you at least be doing something? The Ice Empress grunted as she unleashed her aura that she was originally suppressing. An unrivaled aura was immediately released, as a tremendous pressure that belonged to a 100,000-year soul beast bore down on the 3 ice bears. The 3 bears that went berserk seemed like they were doused with a bucket of cold water as their hysterical aggression immediately disappeared. They growled softly as they stumbled and retreated. The bear that Hui Yuhao had slammed into the ground rolled onto one side, and its manner was almost a little comical. The tiny bear that was following from behind halted immediately when it felt this aura. It covered its head with its paws and lay prostrate on the ground with its buttocks pointed high up into the air just like that, and that was as amusing as it could get. She's the Ice Empress after all. Hui Yuhao heaved a sigh of admiration. The Ice Empress' eyes flashed with green light as a strange sound rang out in her mouth. This sound had a very intriguing and alluring quality, and it was apparently the soul beast's language. The 3 bears nodded continuously when they heard her voice. A superior that was giving them so much pressure meant they didn't even consider resisting. The 3 bears got to their feet after a moment as they swiftly ran away into the distance. The Ice Empress stared at them as they left and muttered under her breath, "It feels great to be back. Snow, how nice would it be if we were still the dictators of this place? We don't have any natural enemies here, and nobody is around to oppose us. This is our paradise." The Snow Empress floated next to her and smiled as she replied, "I beg to differ. I have begun to understand humans ever since I've walked into the human world. Over the past months and years, we have always detested humans, and we hate them for disturbing our way of life. However, we are disturbed considerably less by soul beasts here compared to the Great Star Doe Forest. Even though I have lost my memory after following you, how I can still see the outside world very clearly as the Snow Lady. We have to admit that humans possess intelligence and creativity superior to ours, and we can only adapt to nature while they can change everything. This is the reason why humans can conquer the entire continent even though they were so weak in the beginning when they were born. They are just too creative. If I were given a chance to choose again, perhaps I'd choose to be a human." The Ice Empress' body quivered. She didn't think the Snow Empress would say something like that, as this wasn't the Snow Empress that she knew. The Ice Empress turned towards her, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. The Snow Empress smiled and said, "Are you surprised? Have you not seen through everything, Ice? Think about it, how long have we been living in the extreme north, and how long have we been ruling over this place? Haven't you had enough? Right now, I just want to use the remaining years of my life to experience other things, as much as I can. This is the only way for me to feel excited, and for me to feel glorious. I won't regret it even if Yu-Hao doesn't succeed in the end. Perhaps I will choose to compress my origin and fuse with another human when that happens, and I'll become a human once more." The Ice Empress said, "You've changed, Snow." The Snow Empress smiled. "Yes. I've changed. Otherwise, how could I allow you to be together with Skydream? Speaking of which, how is he worthy of you?" The Ice Empress blushed as she lowered her head. She had been concealing her emotions ever since that day, and she hadn't really paid any regard to the Skydream Iceworm. The Skydream Iceworm wasn't worried, and he just stuck with her every day and asked about her well-being. The Ice Empress' expression of her love gave him blissful happiness, and what made him even more excited was that the Snow Empress didn't stop them from being together. Instead, she was adding fuel to the fire. The Ice Empress said after a few moments, "Yes. You've changed, and I have too. Perhaps all this is because humans have affected us." She turned towards Yu-Hao as she spoke. "I didn't ask any of you to change anything," Yu-Hao said helplessly. The Ice Empress grunted and said, "We can see everything you do. You have been changing us through imperceptible influence." She paused for a moment after that, then continued, "Maybe I should feel fortunate, because you are the one who has shown us the world of humans. Before I met you, I had always believed that humans were tiny and pathetic with all their avarice, cruelty, and cunning. All they knew was to take from Mother Nature. But you have gradually changed my perspective after we met, and I have realized that there are humans like you who are determined with their emotions. Your creativity and your talent, and a great many other things, weren't bestowed upon you by me or the Skydream Iceworm. We are helping you, but the truth is that you've been helping us too. We have learned a great many things from you." Yu-Hao smiled faintly and said, "Can you not be so touching? However, Brother Skydream should really thank me. Without me as a vessel, he wouldn't have had a chance of moving your heart. Don't talk about him," the Ice Empress retorted bashfully. Yu-Hao smiled as he continued. "Ice Empress, since you've already confirmed your feelings, why do you still choose to run away from them? In this world, no matter how powerful you are or how powerful we will become in the future, nobody knows what will happen tomorrow. Just like that day when I was surrounded by enemies on all sides. I would never have expected to land in a trap, and if I weren't lucky that day, in addition to my appropriate response, perhaps I would have died. And your destinies would have changed because of my death." The Ice Empress frowned said, "What are you trying to say? Don't beat about the bush." Yu-Hao said, "I'm trying to tell you that life is short, and we have to enjoy our happiness while we still can. Since you have already confirmed your feelings, why don't you treat them accordingly? Brother Skydream truly likes you, and since you like him too, then you should accept his feelings seriously." The Ice Empress blushed even more as she rolled her eyes and said, "You males just know how to help other males." Yu-Hao chuckled, but said nothing else. He turned towards the Snow Empress and said, "What should we do next?" The Snow Empress smiled plainly and said, We wait, all we must do is wait here. Wait? Hui Yuhao was starting to understand. It seems like the Ice Empress asked those bears to pass some messages along. Right at this moment, the Snow Empress' elegant frame suddenly slid backwards and drifted into the sky like an apparition. Be careful, Snow Empress, Hui Yuhao hurriedly shouted at her. He had personally experienced how frightening those hurricanes were in the sky, but the Ice Empress revealed a mocking smile. The Snow Empress seemed like she didn't hear Hui Yuhao's voice as she floated into the air. She was just dancing in the air, and she stepped on nothing as she waltzed into the winds. She gradually released her aura. Her aura wasn't as intimidating as the Ice Empress, but Hui Yuhao realized to his surprise that everything dimmed when her aura was unleashed. The white snow disappeared. All the ice and snow became blue, and the figure dancing in the sky was the only thing that was white. Her long sleeves waved as white ribbons danced around her. Those blue snowflakes circled around her as they rippled and unfolded. The Snow Lady was like the spirit of the snow. Her wonderful posture made her seem like she had become the core of the extreme North Core region. Hui Yuhao's eyes were frozen. He had never expected someone to have such a beautiful posture, and that someone could be so alluring. The Snow Empress had unrivaled beauty. In this moment, she seemed almost completely immersed in her dance as the gusts in the air grew gentle. The temperature seemed to rise a little amidst the fluttering snowflakes. There was no warmth, but there was no coldness either. There was only a pure and refreshing coolness. The blue hues stretched far into the distance. Everywhere her eyes could reach had been tainted blue, while the sky and the ground could no longer be told apart. This feeling is just wonderful. Hui Yuhao believed, in that moment, that this was the most gorgeous scene he had ever seen. His heart was intoxicated in this moment, while the ice-type soul power in his body rippled along with the Snow Empress dance. The Snow Lady danced in the icy skies. The Snow Empress was a unique being. She was a living being formed by the purest ice-type origin energy of heaven and earth within the extreme North Core region, and after countless years of gestation and growth, had finally developed her own thoughts and intelligence. She finally became an intelligent creature. Her original form was composed of the purest elements. If the manifold mysterious ice essence was a treasure, then she was the extreme North's daughter. The Ice Sky Snow Lady, blessed and unique, the Snow Empress, dancing as snowflakes drifted in the air. Hui Yuhao could clearly feel that he was slowly experiencing moments of enlightenment from this incredibly beautiful dance. But even he wasn't clear what he was being enlightened about. Perhaps this was one of his most peculiar experiences. The Ice Empress stood beside Hui Yuhao, and her eyes were completely intoxicated. She was also immersed in the Snow Empress dance. The Snow Empress had always been a fairy of the snow. The Snow Empress dance continued for an hour or so before she finally descended from the sky and returned to Hui Yuhao's side. Her expression seemed very calm, and not as intoxicated as the Ice Empress was, but Hui Yuhao could tell from her emotions that she was feeling deeply happy. Yes. They are home, and they should be happy. Right at this moment, Hui Yuhao suddenly felt a large mass of life energy emerge from beyond the horizon. This wave traveled in their direction very quickly. Hui Yuhao unleashed spiritual detection and directed it into the distance. That is, Hui Yuhao's pupils instantly contracted, and a fearful look appeared in his eyes. The extreme North Core region was still a world of ice and snow that stretched to the end of the horizon, and not a single trace of life could be seen. However, Hui Yuhao could see within the range of his spiritual detection that there were thousands and thousands of soul beasts that were gathering in his direction. These soul beasts took many different forms. There were flying soul beasts that were rarely seen in the extreme north, while more of them were on the ground. The extreme northern bears that Hui Yuhao had seen before were here, and there were many other species that he had never seen before. Every soul beast seemed very excited, and they were running in his direction as quickly as they could. This was but the second time that Hui Yuhao had seen such a spectacular gathering of soul beasts. The last time this had happened was when the Great Star Doe Forest had launched a beast wave against Shrek City. There weren't as many soul beasts as there were compared to back then, but this was almost a miracle, considering that the extreme North Core region was almost uninhabited. Hui Yuhao quickly calmed down after a very momentary shock. Perhaps only the Snow Empress can create a scene as spectacular as this in the extreme north. Even the Ice Empress isn't as good as she is in this respect. The Snow Empress was number 3 in the 10 great savage beasts, and she was the extreme north's true dictator. She was a formidable soul beast with 700,000 years of cultivation. Of the 10 great savage beasts, only the top 3 controlled a particular region. The beast god, Di Tian, controlled the core of the continent, the Great Star Do Forest. The Evil Eye Tyrant King ruled over the Evil Demon Forest, where there were the most soul beasts within the Sun Moon Empire. However, the Snow Empress' reach was the widest. In the icy plains of the extreme north that stretched to the end of the world, every single soul beast bowed to her command. She was queen in this place, and she was also the dictator. The beast god or the Evil Eye Tyrant King had never come to this place to challenge the Snow Empress' authority. This was because not even the beast god was confident of defeating the Snow Empress in an environment like the extreme north. Furthermore, no other place inhabited by soul beasts was as cohesive as the extreme north. Hu Hao had merged with the Snow Empress by chance and coincidence back then, and she became his spirit. The Snow Empress almost made his body explode because she had too much power on her own, and the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux had to burn the remnants of his divine sense so that Hu Hao could complete the Equality Pact in the end. The Snow Empress became the Snow Lady afterwards. In the beginning, she was like Hu Hao's daughter, and her cute demeanor made everyone express tender affection for her. The Snow Lady gradually grew up, but she was always by Hu Hao's side. She was always helping him, accompanying him, and supporting him. In Hu Hao's heart, the Snow Lady had already become family. Her status in his heart could almost compare to Donga. However, the Snow Empress had recovered her memory not too long ago due to the manifold mysterious ice essence. Hu Hao felt bewildered and helpless. He wasn't afraid of anything else but that the Snow Empress would leave him. The Snow Lady had become the Snow Empress, and he could feel that they were less intimate and there was more reverence. That reverence in his heart had reached the highest possible level at this moment. He finally understood that the little Snow Lady that had once treated him like a father was the dictator of the extreme north, and she ruled over thousands and thousands of soul beasts. The Snow Empress, she's the Snow Empress after all. A faint sadness gradually appeared at the bottom of Hu Hao's eyes, and he subconsciously took a step back. His expression was very calm, but there was a dash of sorrow deep in his heart. If it were possible, he truly hoped that the Snow Empress was still the Snow Lady. He even hoped that she would remain as the tiny Snow Lady that had formed a pact with him in the beginning. The Snow Empress just stood there silently and gazed into the distance as the corner of her mouth curved into a gorgeous smile. The immense pack of soul beasts came ever closer in the distance. The Ice Empress' eyes also grew excited. Yes, they were back, and they were back in the world where they reigned supreme. Thousands of soul beasts thundering across the extreme north's icy plains, what a rare sight. The enormous beast wave was congregating in Hu Hao's direction very quickly, and they stopped only when they were 1,000 meters away from the Snow Empress and the Ice Empress. All the soul beasts in the extreme north slowly lay prostrate on the ground after they reached this place, and they faced the Snow Empress and the Ice Empress with the most respectful and worshipful attitudes. The soul beasts in the distance gradually formed a circle that was 2,000 meters in diameter. This circle's thickness gradually increased as the number of soul beasts grew. Most of the extreme north soul beasts were white. If one didn't look closely, one would think that they were just snow piled up on tiny hills. Some soul beasts that were relatively larger in size were particularly eye-catching. The Snow Empress stood there quietly as the expression on her beautiful face grew cold. She was just standing there, proud and aloof, and there was no other soul beast that dared to stand as proudly as she did. They were in worship, they were worshipping their ruler. The Snow Empress had been gone for far too long. But even so, nobody in the extreme north dared to forget her aura. She was the one who protected their paradise, and her existence made every soul beast in the extreme north bow to her command. Not a single powerful soul beast dared to resist her rule. The extreme north had had very few conflicts ever since the Snow Empress took over as ruler. Nobody dared to challenge or violate her authority. Every single soul beast knew that the Snow Empress was the Ice Sky Snow Lady, who was the spirit of the snow. She could sense everything where there was snow and ice. In the beginning, they were afraid of the Snow Empress, but this fear slowly became reverence. The most ferocious and dominant soul beasts in the extreme north eventually lost their lives to the Snow Empress' 3 ultimate techniques. There were no longer any voices of resistance since then. The only person who could decide everything and dictate everything was the Ice Sky Snow Lady's ice-cold voice. More and more soul beasts gathered at the outer layer. However, the icy plains were still extremely quiet, and one had to listen very closely to hear the soul beasts breathing. They were panting with excitement. For many of these soul beasts, to be able to see the Snow Empress in person was their life's greatest honor. The bears from before had also returned. However, they were just lying prostrate on the outer layer. They weren't even worthy of entering the inner circle. There was a bear that was exceptionally large that returned with them. This bear's tremendous body was like a tiny hill as it walked over, and even though it was traveling on all fours, it was still more than 15 meters tall. Thick fur covered its immense frame, and it radiated faint silver hues. When this enormous bear appeared, the soul beasts that were prostrate on the ground swiftly opened a path so that it could pass. It walked to the innermost circle and faced the Snow Empress before it lay prostrate as well. Its action was just like the tiny bear that Hu Hao had seen before. Its giant buttocks were raised high into the air, and its upper body was flat on the ground. Its large head swayed faintly as it whimpered softly at the Snow Empress. That sound made it seem like the bear had just met its owner, and it was filled with admiration. The Snow Empress smiled faintly when she saw the bear, and she waved at him gently. The soul beasts prostrate on the extreme north immediately stared at the ice bear, and their eyes were filled with envy. The gigantic bear was overjoyed as it stood up and howled elatedly into the air before it ran towards the Snow Empress. The bear was far too big, and its run was like a tiny mountain jumping up and down in the icy plains of the extreme north. Its incredibly fat body would leave deep marks in ground every time it landed. 1,000 meters was but a blink of an eye for this bear. It suddenly slowed down only when it was 50 meters away from the Snow Empress, and it actually crawled the last 50 meters until it was right in front of her. Its head was over 2 meters in diameter, but it still shoved its face before the Snow Empress. His large nose, which was different from its white fur, and was a little pinkish, poked forward. Hu Hao almost felt as if this fellow's breathing could create hurricanes. He didn't need to use spiritual detection for him to judge clearly that this bear was a 100,000-year-old beast. Even though its strength couldn't compare to the great Star Doe Forest's bear lord, Hu Hao figured that this bear couldn't be that much weaker. However, it was extremely respectful towards the Snow Empress. This bear was much more respectful than the bear lord was toward the beast god. This video will end here.